Did you ever go that far into your ideology at the time? Were you holding those positions as well? And then you are all the way in a relationship with a quote unquote trans woman. Does any of it feel abnormal?
It resonated so much when I saw that George Jenko podcast, because I was like, that's all the same things that like we all tell ourselves. Like I left to go to the world, and now I'm leaving the world to come to church, but the church is kind of looking a little bit too similar to the world.
Interesting.
Ruslan.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with one of the OG YouTubers in a way, which is really interesting to say because he's not that old. He's younger than I am, but he's one of the original creators that actually inspired me to take YouTube more seriously. And when I first started watching his stuff, he was not walking with Jesus, and now he has had a radical transformation in the past couple of years, which came with all sorts of controversy and things that we're going to get into in this conversation. Without any further ado, we have Jeffrey Nova Almonte.
What's up? What's up?
Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for your trust in having me come on. I don't take it lightly that, you know, you've built an audience that trusts you, that you're going to deliver something that's edifying and something that will help people spiritually grow at the end of the day.
Amen. So I've had a chance to kind of get to know you a little bit offline and hear some of your story, which is pretty crazy. You put out a YouTube video a couple months ago, just kind of going over your testimony. And the thought that it was so funny, like when I saw it on my feed, and I think the video was titled like "I'm Alive" or something like that, right? I was like, oh snap! And then I started the video, and like then I go to the comments, and I'm like, oh, like he's a Christian now. Like how fire is that, you know? And then I remember going back to the DM I sent you in 2018, which I don't remember what it was specifically, but it was more or less like, hey man, I heard you mention something about faith or something in passing, and I just got the sense that you had some sort of biblical worldview, even though back in 2018 you were definitely not on that. And to see it come full circle was like, how wild and crazy to me that I saw you having the Jesus arc in your story years ago, and then to see it finally come full circle, you're not uploading for years. It just really encouraged me, bro, and it blessed me. And I was like, and then when I reached out to you, I was just like, scroll up and see my DM, you know, and it was like, yeah, it was dope. And so like I was legitimately a fan of your content. Like you were making really interesting skits and some short films and some kind of commentary rant almost type videos. How did you initially get into YouTube? Because we're talking to what, 2011, 2012? You're fairly early.
Yeah, when I first got on YouTube, I was just like everyone else. I was just a spectator, a commenter. And I was like, I would see what was called the ranting community, which now they call it the commentary community or whatever, or the podcasting. But before, people would just get online, and it wasn't like super fancy video essays or anything. It would just be someone would turn on their little cheap $25 digital camera, and it just rant about like, man, McDonald's new chicken nuggets is trash, bro. Why would they release? You know what I'm saying? Like, just stuff like that.
What year was that when you turned the camera on for the very first time? What year was that?
I was 11 or 12, so that had to be 2007 or 2008.
Whoa, your first upload was in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And you were 11 or 12.
Yeah.
My son is about to be 10.
You ain't got no business being online.
He don't even got access to YouTube.
Nah, I agree with that. What we know now about social media and its effects on people is not what we knew back then. You know, it was just like a little fringe hobby. Like you were just the weirdo in your basement, you know, making videos. It was something that was very fringe. You know, there was just forums and stuff. This was before Twitter and Facebook were popular. This was like MySpace days.
And so, were you consistent from that age, from 11, 12?
Pretty consistent. Wow. I would like.
So people saw you grow up on YouTube.
Literally. I'll post like videos of me messing with my cat, videos of me making paper guns, drawing videos, making a rant about Gears of War or the Captain America movie, just stuff like that.
What goes a trip, way back,
just
man.
Random stuff. That was like personality YouTube. You just went online and you just did whatever you felt like doing that day. There was no such thing as like having 4 different channels for 4 different things.
Now, when you initially were on YouTube, you grew up in a Christian household.
Yes.
Were you initially, as you were getting on YouTube, still kind of walking with the
I was
Lord?
still in church.
You were still in church.
I was still in church. I would get out of church and come home and start cursing up a storm, ranting and doing all of these raunchy skits and all of that. I just had a potty mouth. And it's crazy because like when I was around like 14, 15, no, I was about 15, 16 when I became like the worship leader. Back then we just called it the band director.
Okay.
So yeah, I was in church at the time and I left the church when I was about 17. But so, you know, all of those years from 11 up to 17, yeah, I made videos on YouTube.
Do you feel like even though you had a potty mouth and whatever, do you feel like you at least attending church regularly as a kid still gave you some sort of grounding in terms of your day-to-day lifestyle?
Yeah. Like, but besides, you know, those flaws that I had, I definitely believed in Jesus. I believed in God. I was very much a devout Christian, you know. I didn't read my Bible as much as I should. I mean, I was 11, 12. A lot of 11, 12-year-olds, it's really hard to get them to, you know, really get serious about that type of stuff. But I was a worshiper. Like, I loved worshiping. I loved singing to God. And that's a problem you see nowadays, even with people that are older now too, where they just want to make music, but they don't really want to get into the deeper levels of like actually getting to know God and reading the word and stuff like that. So I think that was one of the major issues with me and a lot of the misconceptions that I had. It was easy for the enemy to lure me away because essentially my foundation just came to some feel good songs. You know, it wasn't really rooted that much in a lot of, you know, scripture.
Would you say at that point as a child, because your mother and father are both Christians, right? They're still together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you grow up in this Christian home. And so at that point, would you say you had a personal faith or was it more of just like a cultural family faith?
It was definitely personal.
Okay.
It was definitely personal. Like I had said in my testimony, my first experience of being saved and coming to like having the veil lifted was when I was about 7 or 8 years old, when I had went to that church in the Bronx and they had broke down like who Jesus was in the Bible and what grace was and how we didn't deserve it, but he did it anyway. And I just came home and told my mom and dad, hey, let's just sit down and pray. Just something in me just felt to pray. And I just felt that true kind of, that was, I guess, like the first time that I wanted to pray. You know, like that I, instead of my dad saying, hey, let's open up these scriptures or hey, let's read this or you're going to do this and that. It was me saying, I want to step out and do this. And in stepping out in that faith, that's when the Holy Spirit sealed me. Like that very same day, like I was his child and I became prodigal, you know, later on, but I was still his child. I couldn't get away from him. No, you know, no matter how many times he kept trying and how many times I would reject, I just kept coming back.
Yeah.
So
that's powerful because sometimes we think folks who are perhaps going through that prodigal season, perhaps they're dabbling in some really dark stuff, which you did. We'll get into that later. Sometimes we view them in their current state and we think that they're beyond redemption or God's given up on them. You know, so that's really cool to hear you say that. Now, as you're dabbling in YouTube, how long until you kind of get a pop and all of a sudden people are watching, you're getting subscribers, not necessarily money, but like you're like, oh, like this is actually
popularity.
A thing. Yeah. How long did that take?
Because monetization didn't even really happen until I was maybe 16 or 17 years old, back when they actually released all the MCNs and all that. But I would say when I was 14 or 15 years old, I had released a video called Facebook Fails where I was like roasting people on Facebook. It was back during like the swag era and like dance teams in New York where kids would like do something called a Bronx wine. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it was just a weird time. Okay. Y'all could go down that rabbit hole, look up Bronx wine and whatever. And so that had blown up a little bit. But then when I did this Old Spice comedy skit when I was about 15, 16 years old, that blew up. That made it to like World Star. So that was like, you know, got like my first 100,000 views.
Okay. Which was a lot.
That was
back
crazy.
Then.
That was crazy. Yeah. Back at that time, that was like getting 1 million. But now 1 million is like getting 10.
That's a fact. So you growing up in Harlem, pretty rough upbringing. I remember watching a video where we shared a story about like you getting robbed.
Yeah.
And the way they robbed you was like real slick because it wasn't like, get your dukes up. I'm taking your stuff. It wasn't like the movies. What was that like?
It growing up in Harlem was definitely rough. The first time I heard gunshots like right outside my window because I lived on the first floor. I was about 8 years old, and I had came into faith, which is so crazy. Like when you come into faith, all of a sudden stuff started happening. First time I heard gunshots, I was 8 years old. And I remember like literally diving on the floor and just screaming, Jesus, Jesus, help me, help me. I was so petrified. Like that was, you know, you hear gunshots in movies, you see guns and you see violence. Like I was a huge Mortal Kombat fan. I loved violent video games, loved violent movies. But to be in that proximity to where you hear it and it's so loud and you know immediately what it is, it's otherworldly, especially being 8 years old. And then I think either later that year or a couple years later, there was a time where this kid got shot, and it was like a 17-year-old kid. He got shot outside my grandmother's house, and she lives on the 3rd floor. So I remember looking out and seeing him like bleed out.
You saw.
Yeah, like he was there, and we were hoping
you watched somebody as a child.
Yeah, like everybody was crowding around, and
was anyone trying to help him?
Everybody. They were trying to direct the ambulance, but you know, New York, it was Harlem. Like the streets were really crowded, and the ambulance was trying to get to him. They did show up within like a couple minutes, but a couple minutes feels like a long time when you're watching somebody bleeding. Like it was urgent. This is a young kid. Apparently what it was, like somebody tried to come and take his chain and he said no. That's apparently what happened. And all of that over a chain, lost his life, like got shot in the stomach, and he bled out. He didn't make it. And that was awful. I was around the same age, 8, 9, 10.
Sheesh, man.
8, 9, 10. So
do you feel like that did a number on your mental health that you didn't quite realize?
Yeah, I didn't know. Like, I didn't realize like what growing up, and I'm smiling because that's kind of like a defense mechanism I have. I didn't realize how desensitized I was to sort of things like that. Like, even when you think of like games like Mortal Kombat, it's violence wrapped around with humor. So I liked stuff like that. And I also remember I was making paper guns and stuff. I had like this kind of fixation on firearms just because I liked them. I liked how they worked. I had like this, I just wanted to know how they worked. And looking at that, like I never even made that link till just now of like the fact that I liked firearms to stuff like that. Gun violence growing up. And it definitely did a number. I seen this documentary series called I Am a Killer around when I was about 21, 22 years old. And I had seen true crime stuff before, but this in particular was different. Like they get less into the life of the killer and they get more into the life of like the victims and the victim's family, and the family's like sitting there like detailing like what it's been like to lose this person. And I was like, yo, like I knew that murder was wrong theoretically, but to me, to be honest, it kind of was just like, no big deal. That happens. You know, we get shot every day. It don't really click that this is something that's so destructive that somebody lost their son, somebody lost their daughter, somebody lost, like, you know, this was a person that their coworkers are never going to see them again, or like it was very heavy when I seen it. And that was when like I actually felt it. That's when I was like, yo, like this is a huge, huge deal.
Because you're growing up, you don't really know what is happening to you or what you're seeing, what you're experiencing is abnormal.
Exactly.
Until you have some distance and space from it. And you're like, yo, that wasn't normal for an 8-year-old to see a kid bleed out, you know? As you're growing up, so I vividly remember that story of you getting robbed. Was that like the most violent thing that had happened to you, or was there other stuff that you're going through and you're seeing and it's just like...
There was other stuff. I mean, I was walking down the street one day and some lady that was probably doped out just came and socked me in my eye out of nowhere, just randomly. And I had to go to the hospital for a contusion, which sounds more serious than it is. It's just a black eye. Yeah. But it was wild. Like it was the weirdest thing ever. I'm walking down the block with my ex. We're just walking, comes by, boom, socks me in my eye. I'm like, what just hit me? Like it felt like a glass bottle like fell or something. I didn't know what happened at first. Then I turned around and I see the lady like cursing. And she's with like her boyfriend or pimp or whatever. Huge dude. And he's like, I told you stop effing around. And he punches her in the face. Like full, like lean his whole body into her. And her whole head jerks back. I'm like, I don't even know how to react now because I got hit in the face, but somebody else hit me for them. And that's like her boyfriend. It was, New York is just the most randomest.
You're like a teenager at this point?
Yeah, at that point I was about 19, 20.
Yeah, and so the story of when that video you talking about you getting robbed, but it was like a slick robbing. Did you know the dude, or was it someone from around the neighborhood?
I didn't know him.
You didn't know him. Just
I didn't know him.
super random.
It was just we were literally in the basketball court. I wanted to leave. My friends didn't want to leave. They were like playing basketball, and these other three dudes, they came and they wanted to play with us. And I have already felt like kind of a funny feeling about like these randoms coming and wanted to play with us. But I'm like, whatever. Like, we just play. They want to play.
Mm-hmm.
The most I thought was like, just make sure you take your ball, because some people like to come on the court and then play with your ball and never give it back.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was gonna be the most of it. And I was like, oh, let's leave. They still wanted to play, so I left by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Bad move. And then as I'm walking, the dude left. The dude that was one of the dudes that was with him, he left and he followed me out. So like down the block, he came like jogging to me like, yo, bro, like, where you from? Like acting like he's just wanting to walk with me, so.
And what did he end up robbing you for? Was it a phone?
iPhone 4 at the time that literally just came out.
Yeah.
That was very common. I witnessed a friend get robbed when we were like 11 years old. He got robbed by this dude that looked like maybe 19, 20 years old in a pizza shop for a freaking $1 and a tech deck.
Yeah.
Like just things that people did just to assert power. Like not even for the money, not even for this, just to assert power, or just to go and tell their gang member buddies like, oh, hey, look what I did. Like,
do you think it's because they felt powerless otherwise?
Maybe it's hard because I was adjacent to that, right? Like I was in the hood, I was living in the hood, but I had the privilege of growing up with two parents that were together, that had Christ in their lives. They were also boomers, so they were already well into their 40s by the time, I was growing up. I didn't have like young parents that didn't know what they were doing. So they kept me out of a lot of that stuff. My mom had a very watchful eye over me. There were plenty of times where I could have joined a gang. If I didn't have the guidance, if I didn't have people in my life, could have easily. So there's a lot of parts of that culture on the inside that I didn't really experience, that I just witnessed, or I had friends that were in that, and then I saw what happened to them, or I was a victim of whatever was going on within those gangs. But that's kind of like how it is in the hood. You either join a gang or you become a victim yourself. So it's either you victimize or you become the victim.
Yeah. It's heavy, man. It's heavy, especially because going to New York frequently and kind of seeing some of this stuff was interesting. And then now it's finally getting like, I would say national attention with like the Bronx drill situation and like how many kids are getting
all the looting.
Yeah.
They looted a laundromat of all places recently. I saw that Cash Jordan or something like made a video on. I was like, a laundromat for real, bro? Some quarters?
What do you think it is? Is it just the disparity of you're in a major city, you go down and you're on the Lower East Side, you're into these like really flamboyant, rich neighborhoods, but you're so close to because I remember hearing, I want to say Jordan Peterson talk about how what causes violence is not poverty, it's relative poverty. It's not that destitute people hurt people. It's that people who are around wealthy people that are that feel powerless.
It's the wealth gap.
That's the wealth gap that causes violence. Would you say that that's like an assessment, like a realistic assessment of like what's been happening in New York and the culture there?
That is pretty interesting, to see that, because it's like there's a resentment, right? Like you don't know what you don't have unless you see somebody have it. So when you see other people having it, especially in the hood, it's weird because you have, for example, what people call black on black crime, which is really just proximity crime. It's just crime.
Yep.
All across every race, it's pretty much the same rate of you're going to go and attack your neighbor. People, since we're a pretty segregated country, people still live like, usually they will live next to somebody that is the same race.
Right.
So if I'm going to commit a crime and I just want a quick come up, I'm going to probably go rob an old black lady down the street. You know what I'm saying? Or the male lady, someone within my own community. I'm not going to go and rob somebody on Wall Street. And on top of that, I know if you rob somebody on Wall Street, you can't get away with that. But you can get away with robbing your own people. I think it's a lot of some of that too. It's opportunistic.
Okay.
They know that they can get away with it. They know that there's like there's the no snitching. They know that a lot of the stuff in the inner city gets overlooked. So they can get away with robbing somebody. Nobody's going to go and, go through the hassle of trying to get justice for that.
Yeah.
So.
That sucks, man. That sucks that's like the reality for people, and that was the reality for you. And growing up in San Diego is similarly not as violent or similar, but still similar in a major city, you're gonna have these issues, and it's unfortunate because it goes to think like how much who someone becomes is based on their environment, you know, and the impact of their environment. Because you're in an environment where you have a mother and father at home, but you're still exposed to all of this sort of stuff, you know. Now, you growing up in the faith, was there a point in time where you remember having like a pivot away from Jesus in church? Was it when you had the situation with that pastor at that church and you guys were trying to get instruments? I remember you told that story. And was it after that you kind of made a decision to all right, I'm not really doing my faith no more? Was that like a fork in the road moment for you?
It kind of was, because before that, there was some context also of where I was online, right? I was chronically online. And so spending all this time on YouTube, you start coming across the Amazing Atheists, the Richard Dawkins, all of the people that's been on YouTube.
Yep.
And I used to get their perspective, and I knew, I'm like, there's a God, come on, bro. But a lot of things that they said about the Bible and its inerrancy, that I was like, because I didn't understand like some of the historical proof stuff. When it comes to the Bible, like most of the time in the Bible, they just like, this is the word of God. Why is it the word of God? Because the word of God says it's the word of God. It's like, bro, come on. That only works.
It's like the circular
it's
reasoning.
Circular logic. That only works for like maybe up until you're 12 years old. Once I have like the reasoning, you can't no longer like literally the source is the source, bro. Like you have to be able to break that down as people mature, so that way they can have the apologetic, you know, muscle to be able to defend their faith. And so if somebody comes and says like, oh, this thing is man-made, it's written by man, how do you know? All of that stuff starts to kind of chip away at that stuff. So it's like deep down, I know there's God. I still believe in Jesus. I've had a personal encounter with Jesus. That's why relationship is everything, right? Personal encounter with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit. I'm like, there's a God. That you can't tell me nothing about. But with the Bible telling me, oh, it's corrupt, it's not really this, it's not really that, that was where my weak spot was. And so, and also seeing like church politics, seeing stuff like that with, like you just described with the pastor, not feeling appreciated at church. I'm like, I'm just gonna leave the church. Once I was out of that community, it was easier for me to go into a direction to where now there was no accountability. That's when I fornicated for the first time when I was 17 years old. And that to me was just like, she's my girlfriend. It's okay to do that, you know. Whereas when I was in the church, no, that was frowned upon. It was like you don't do that.
So it was a combination of those seeds being sown of authenticity of the Bible. How is it reliable? How do we know it's reliable? Right? It was like that, an intellectual standpoint, and then you having an actual negative experience with church politics, and then you're making the cognitive decision to, I'm not going to do this church thing.
Right.
And then how soon after that did things kind of start unraveling for you in terms of where you were with your sexuality and your morality and all that sort of stuff?
So, when I was 17, fornicated, then you know, I would have girlfriends, and that just became the norm now. Sex outside of marriage. There was that lack of accountability. There were also some other things that happened as well. Like there was a time where I had gotten blackmailed, and it was a situation that involved someone blackmailing me for my nudes. Let's just say that, to put it vaguely, to not get super deep into it. Stuff like that started to kind of normalize this brokenness, this sexual brokenness. And then, you know, how I said in the testimony, like at a very young age, I was exposed to pornography. And so I already had a pornographic mind. So around 18, 19 was where it was just like, 18, 19, 20 and on, like it was just whatever to me. And I would say at a pretty early age, I always had this thing where I thought I would be with two women that loved each other. Like having a throuple was like, I guess like a fantasy of mine.
Relationship wise, like you wanted
relationship wise, like not even just a sexual thing. I'm not exactly sure like where that comes from pathologically. But it was just always there. Like I always would have like crushes on multiple people, like Totally Spies. I don't know if you know what that cartoon is, but Totally Spies would be like, there's two of the spies. I liked both of them. You know, would have that fantasy of both of them being a girlfriend or whatever. Same thing with that's pretty much the same that happened. So I'm just like, okay. At some point, I was like, I don't want to be in a relationship unless it's a polyamorous one. And also, it was because I was a serial cheater. Like, I would cheat in every relationship that I was in. I got cheated on in one of my first serious relationships when I was in high school. And so that also made me think, oh, well, that's normal. Somebody, you know, and that person was like very controlling. So they were like, always going through my phone and always making sure that I wasn't doing something. Lo and behold, they were the ones that was doing something. Yeah. And so when that happened, I'm like, well, I'm gonna just do whatever I want then, because if you're doing whatever you want, you know, and that's also what got me into polyamory. I'm just like, well, maybe this is just normal. Like people want other people and people want to be with other people. So why should I have to deny myself if no one's doing that? No one's honoring that. Everyone's just pretending to be monogamous and pretending like they're doing the right thing. And you trying to clock me and make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And I've always had that complex too. If it felt like everybody would always be doing something as soon as I did it, oh, it's a problem. Like even growing up, it's like everybody be talking in class. Jeffrey, stop talking. It's not just me. I didn't. Yeah, but I heard you. Your voice is distinct. That's my problem. That my voice is distinct. You know what I'm saying? Just stuff like that would happen. But that's what happens. Like when you're chosen by God. When he has sealed you, you can't do the same thing that everybody else is doing.
That's good.
So everybody else is going to get away with doing things. Yeah. You're not going to get away because you know the truth. And like I said, I was saved at a very young age. So it's like, now I'm Christian. I'm a kid. All these kids are doing kid stuff. I can't do that stuff.
Yeah. And all along, is the YouTube and the success you're having on YouTube creating more status for you within your local proximity? Meaning now it's not just a girl at school that you're interested in.
Right.
Now you have your kind of pick of whoever you want to talk to, and women are approaching you? Or is it as you're out in your community, you're a high status, high power individual in the eyes of other people?
No, it's definitely like women are coming to me. I was always like the shy type. I did not know how to talk to girls. I still don't know how to talk to girls. I just learned how to flirt with my wife. I'm kidding. But she would be like, man, he lying. He know how to. But no, yeah, it was definitely like now I had that added level of attraction that I'm somebody that's popular.
Yep.
And so me in my eyes, I kind of grew up with a low self-esteem just because of a lot of the stuff that I've been through and romantics. Like I had a low self-esteem, so I didn't really see it. Like even in school before, like I was like super booming on YouTube. Like I had a friend and he was like, oh, like, you know, all of these girls, like, or whatever, they talking about you, they trying to get at you. And I would think he was messing with me, because that's how you would do in middle school. Like, oh, so-and-so like you, she don't like you. And I went from going to school in the hood to going to school that was like a performance art school, like real quirky. So it was different environment entirely, but I digress. So, you know, when I just didn't believe like, oh, people are going to come at me because I'm more popular. I just saw myself as a regular person because I was. The only difference is I just made videos on YouTube. I was just a kid, still living in the hood, still in the same financial situation, still on food stamps, still living in Section 8, seeing the same passed out, you know, drug addicts in the street that I've been seeing every day. What's different, you know? So I didn't see myself as like, oh, these people are now going to come after me.
Yeah. What an interesting experience you're having in terms of like, you're raised in a Christian home, your parents are together and love each other, they love Jesus, you have that foundation, but you get popping as a very young individual with immense access to influence and status, and then you're going to this performing arts school, and now people are approaching you because you're a high status person in that circle.
But within school, it didn't really happen so much in school. It was more so online.
Okay. So you're meeting people online that didn't want to meet in person. Okay,
exactly. Which is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Which is crazy. Like now as an adult, you don't just go meeting random people online unless they're Ruslan, because I'm here with you now, right?
To be fair, we had quite a bit of a conversation for, a couple months we've been chatting. So it wasn't like we chat and then you're flying out
I'm
here.
messing with you. But no, I'm just being facetious. But but I guess it kind of is a normal thing. It's New York City. People make friends online all the time. And there's this idea of stranger danger that was kind of like pushed during the MySpace era that didn't really play out, because for the most part, so many people meet most of their friends online now.
Yep.
Like most of the time people were friends in high school, and then after high school it's just like, I'm done. You never see them again. So people felt closer to people that was online. I don't have any friends really that like from high school, like people that maybe hit me up and see how I'm doing like once or twice a year, but friends, no, those were just like online, and most of your interactions were online. Like I said, I was chronically online. So that's how most of the interaction would happen.
Yeah.
And now you have a skewed perception because you know me based on what you see on the social media page. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a real, there's something that's missing there.
Because you're performing on your YouTube. Like, what you're doing is a form of performance art. Even your rants or your skits, like, that's still a performance to a certain extent. And that's the perception people have of you.
But I didn't see it that way. That's the funny thing. I think that's what gravitates a lot of people toward the content that I used to make, because I just saw it as me just talking and being myself, and people hating in the comments, like calling me gay, calling me the N-word, calling me all types of crazy stuff, and I just didn't care. I mean, look at one of the most viral videos I made, I don't give a F or whatever. I mean, that's a testament to kind of like the mentality that I had. I would just go on there, say how I felt about something, and to me, it wasn't really a performance. That was an outlet for me. It was a hobby for me. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get on YouTube and make a business out of this, or I'm gonna get on YouTube and the skits and all of that stuff came after the fact. You know, the skits and all of that came from me seeing other YouTubers doing that. I'd be like, oh, I want to do one of those for fun. The filming stuff and getting into cameras and all of that came after the fact.
Got you.
So you can see kind of the progression of how one of my film series, My Way, super cringe. You see the first episode versus the fourth episode, you're like, oh wow, the first one is just like, this is just him wanting to make something cool that he liked. And then the fourth one is like, oh, he's actually trying to like do cinematography, actually trying to direct something. Was
this when YouTube still had the YouTube centers, the creator spaces, right? Because we had one in LA. I went to once. And then it shut down right after the pandemic. COVID. Yeah. And so did you ever like go up there? And
I used to love it in there. When I was 18, that was like my prime as far as just popping out content. Because I would be in the YouTube space. They open at 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I was there from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I would get myself a suite, sit in the editing room and say, what am I going to do today? Am I going to, make a video? Like, am I going to shoot or am I going to edit? And I'll just sit there, edit everything. They had snacks, water, everything. That I'm so sad.
I wish they brought that back, because I was fired. I gave a lot, because you had to have like I think it was 10,000 subscribers, and you can like book things. And if you had 100,000 subscribers, you got more access and more credits. Yeah, I was just getting started, and then like I think I cracked my 10,000 subs, and then they shut it down like right around the same time I cracked my 10.
And they also raised the tier because more and more people were hitting those milestones. So it's like now at 100,000 you can only book this or that. Now you needed 1 million.
Right.
So
yeah. So at what point are you like really starting to dabble in not just sexual immorality, but full on like you become this kind of like leftist voice online? Because there's also your ideology had to have shifted to some degree, right? And
somewhat, you can say, yeah.
And so which came first, the ideology shift of kind of what's mainstream now, right? Or was it the lifestyle, and now let me find an ideology that fits the lifestyle?
Fits the lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Like to try to find, like, I think it was more so what social media kind of does, or politically wise, is like, this is your personality. This is who you are, right? And it'll kind of shrink you, like within this box are like certain things that are important to you. It's not everything, but it's just certain things that are important to you, right? And so social media algorithmically kind of just shrinks your personality into this little tiny thing. And so now you're just the leftist YouTuber. You're not just...
Because you might have one or two things that you were like, oh yeah, they're right on this.
Yes.
And then that becomes your whole identity.
Yes.
Yeah.
They just show you, it's kind of like what I say all the time, the algorithm is a mirror. It just shows you more of yourself. But if you're in a bad mood one day and you say, a white guy got me upset today, why is that? And you go looking for videos like that, it's not going to just be a moment anymore. Now you're going to keep getting videos talking about why white people suck.
Yeah.
And it's gonna keep
Did you
feeding
ever
you
really
that.
search that? Like, why?
No. But just just to simplify things, when you look up, stuff on racism, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've always been like open-minded or receptive to like various different perspectives and thoughts. And usually conservatives are not, to put it plainly, no offense to anyone that's a conservative. Usually conservative just like, this is the truth and this is the way life should be. Right? Whereas liberals, they're just like, everyone is valid. Right? So to me, I'm like, everything is valid even if I don't disagree, even if I disagree with it. Right? Like I can disagree with you, but it could still be like valid and I can try to understand you even if I don't agree with you. I think now it's kind of turned into everything is valid. Like everyone else is valid. And if someone else says that everything is not valid, they're not valid, which is a kind of, it's a paradox, right? It's kind of like how I described, like when it comes to a lot of LGBT issues, a lot of it is, I want you to accept me and I want you to tolerate my life and how I'm living. But I won't tolerate how you think life should go. Like you expressing your views and how you think life should go, I'm not going to tolerate that. But I expect you to tolerate my intolerance of you. It's this weird kind of that I'm still trying to figure out how that happens.
I think what happens is, you've heard of the idea of the Overton window and what's acceptable. Yeah. So I think what happened is the Overton window shifted further left with regards to like sexual liberation. And now it was no longer like I remember when I was younger, like the gay people that I had interactions with were more or less like we just want to be left alone.
Right.
Just leave us alone. Let's just, now it's shifted to like, no. Like you have to affirm that what we're doing is the same as or better than a heteronormative relationship and a nuclear family. So now it's not just you have to accept, you now have to affirm. Right now, it's like tolerance to acceptance to affirmation. And if you don't, then you're a bigot.
Right.
Which is like the average person is just non-combative and doesn't want to have no smoke. So now it's like, all right, well, I don't want to be a bigot. I want to be that. So I guess I affirm this.
And it's not just being a bigot. There's a social media clause in a lot of just regular jobs. I remember back when I worked at Walmart, there was a social media clause. You can get fired for the things you say on the internet if they deem it to be offensive.
Wow.
So it's not just words. It's not just, oh, we disagree. It's now you are doing the very thing that the other side has done. Like you've become the enemy because at some point in time and in certain states, it's still the thing where you can get discriminated against, like for a job opportunity because you're gay or because you're trans. So now you can't just like sit at a desk and type because you're gay or you're trans. What that got to do with, being a secretary, you know?
Right.
But now they're doing the opposite.
Yeah.
Now it's the opposite where it's like, if you don't call me by my pronouns, you got 5 times to get it right. And if you get it wrong, I've heard this. Yeah. I don't remember if it was my wife or a friend of mine where they were working and somewhere there was someone that had they them pronouns. And they were like, you got 3 chances. By the 3rd time, it's an HR report, bro.
Oh my God.
You misgender somebody after 3 times. It's like, nah, you doing that on purpose. And it's like, bruh. Yeah. I've been talking like this my whole life. Yeah. And you think in a week, I'm gonna get my act together to talk how you want me to talk? Yeah. And it's wild. And Jordan Peterson, that's one thing that I definitely agreed with him on when he went through that whole controversy where like he had all those college kids like banging on his door, and he's like, there's no evidence that using the right pronouns is gonna, So I was like, it's crazy that if somebody just refuses to just partake in your life and your views, now all of a sudden they're invalid. Yeah.
And did you ever go that far into your ideology at the time? Were you holding those positions as well? Not on some like, look, I'm going to explore and be polyamorous and whatever, but that like I'm going, and if you don't affirm me, now you're a bigot and you're bad. Were you ever all the way on that end of the spectrum?
No,
okay.
Because by the time, like, what's funny about me being non-binary, That's when I was already like pretty much off YouTube by that point. Like I
Okay.
remember there was like maybe 3 videos, and within those last 3 or 4 videos, that's when I had like told people like, yeah, I'm non-binary. But I had already been non-binary through that. That was something that was kind of like personal and private to me for the most part. But then people would ask questions, and I was just like, yeah, if you see me dressed in this certain way, that's why. And so that was like something that was private to me. That was something that like I felt like that's not something that I'm gonna impose on somebody else, right? Like I'll tell somebody, hey, these are my pronouns. If they messed it up, you know, or if they chose not to use those pronouns, how am I gonna tell my family, oh yeah, I don't want you calling me this?
So there were times where you had preferred pronouns, however, your family would not use them. Was that real?
Right.
Wow. What were your pronouns at the time?
They, them.
They, them. Okay.
But it's hard to explain to a Hispanic family what they, them is when the entire language is gendered.
Yeah.
Él y ella.
Yeah.
They try to do something where they said Latinx.
Latinx, I remember that.
Or AX.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is AX? It's still, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
it's a gendered language, even like la radio.
Yeah.
It's not, so it's.
Yeah. So how did you get to that place of identifying as non-binary? Like what was the catalyst to get there?
I guess I always had issues with dissociation.
Okay.
Just because of the repeated traumatic environment that I lived in. And so I didn't like, it felt like I was a ghost. Like when I was 12, like it went from feeling like a ghost, like people couldn't see me, or like I was a thought in someone's head. Like I would question, like, am I real? Like, is this actually happening? It's hard to describe like kind of that surreal experience, or like the sort of existential OCD of just constantly contemplating your existence and reality itself. And then going into like feeling like you're watching a movie, or like you don't have control over what you're doing, and like someone else is doing something for you, and you're kind of just spectating while someone else is doing something. And so in feeling that sort of dissociation in combination with the political sphere around, you know, me being agender, I think that's what one day I came and told my ex, I'm like, hey, like I don't, when people call me young man, I feel strange. Like I don't feel like a young man. And before I thought it was because I was younger and I was still a boy, but now I am a young man, but people call me young man. I don't feel, it feels strange. And she was like, oh, do you feel like you're a woman? And I was like, that's what's even more confusing, that I don't feel like a woman either. And so throughout that, I'm just like, oh, I'm agender. I'm neither man. But really, like I said before, like at the bottom of it, I didn't feel human. I didn't feel connected. I felt far away from my emotions. I felt like I didn't have permission to feel things. I was always very keenly aware of other people's emotions. And that was my main thing. Like I need to get approval from those that I love and make sure that they're good. But I can't, like my emotions were inconvenient in a sense. And I think that's kind of like how that blossomed into this not feeling human, and then not feeling human, which is the primary thing that was going on. I'm like, well, I'm agender because only humans can be male or female. So it was way deeper rooted. It was way like, a lot of people see like some of my Instagram posts, like just like, oh, so you're saying that you being transgender was a sin and this and the third. And I'm just like, it's crazy. Like that's all y'all see. Like all y'all see is like wearing the feminine clothes to not wearing feminine clothes. But it's way deeper. And when you look at a lot of this stuff and people don't want to admit it, and they'll say, oh, I had the perfect childhood. Like I'm gay, but I had the perfect childhood. Ain't nothing ever happened to me. So how is it that constantly when people that are like people like us, we go see therapists and we do have problems, but then they'll turn it around and say, oh no, the problem comes from the problem comes from people not affirming you. But that's not true. The problem happened way before that. And we'll say like, oh, because people are not accepting me, that's why people that are gay or trans, that's why they're depressed or have suicidal thoughts and this and the third.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is interesting that as the rise of mental health awareness has happened, which I think is a good thing. I think there are people that deal with mental health stuff that need treatment and therapy and whatever, that at the same time you've also seen this rise of these identities being more and more prevalent, you know? So you would think that like there wouldn't be such a correlation, you know? And I'm not saying there's a causation, but there definitely seems to be a correlation that as people are more aware of their feelings and their depression and their anxiety, all of a sudden there's this rise in all these identities and all these different things, which is a very interesting observation. In your journey, you go from being non-binary to then full on like an attraction to, you said trans women on that testimony. What was that like, and how did that happen?
Well, and I have a theory to tell you after the suit regarding like all the different identities giving rise. So remind me about that if I forget. But it before even like taking on that identity, right? There was already that sort of moral relativity. There was already that sort of everybody lives their own truth. There is no such thing as truth. I literally had this philosophy called there is no right or wrong, only perspective and circumstance. So your circumstance influences your perspective, but your perspective can also make you act to change your circumstance. And those things are kind of like a yin and yang that manipulate one another, and we don't know which one came first, in a sense. Sort of like picture an infinity symbol. That would be perspective and circumstance. And so that was kind of like the developing philosophy that I had. And so in that, already having that postmodernism, as Jordan Peterson said, or like that moral relativism, you're able to accept other systems, which is funny because it's like you reject systems, but then you just take on another one. You can't get out of systems. Everything is a system.
That's good.
We live in a universe that is a system. And people want to be down with hierarchy. There's hierarchy, period. And so when you see that moral relativism and like, oh, nothing means anything, anything can mean anything. If someone says, oh, a woman is a woman is a woman, you can't even like define what a woman is. If someone says they're a woman and they're dressing like a woman, acting like a woman, it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's okay. Like, and you know, you're attracted to that because they're literally, it becomes a sort of performance. I remember that I had this, there was this girl that I used to talk to that she was a liberal feminist, and she had introduced me to this idea of gender as a performance.
Interesting.
And so she was like, people are not attracted to genitalia, and people are not attracted to men or women or male and female. They're attracted to a performance. So the performance of gender. Right? So like you'll have, lesbians that will only be attracted to studs or only attracted to femmes, right? It's a whole nother realm. It's a whole nother world of attraction. It's like, there's some lesbians out there be like, oh, I can never date another stud because I'm a stud, right? It's like, I'm the masculine one. So it's a performance, but some masculine people are attracted to masculine people. So it's like this performance of all of these different kind of layers, and you just start adding more and more and more labels. You know, there's a new letter in the LGBTQIA plus to spirit, whatever. Every year there's a new one.
There's a new one. Yeah.
So it starts to become so specific that perfectly leads me into what I was thinking earlier with my theory. My theory is that social media makes people less social, right? Because they don't actually interact in real life. And so that's why you see like a lot of TikTokers and stuff with like neo pronouns because like they don't touch grass. So they're just in these online spaces where people just like, you can be whoever you want to be. So there's like the opposite of social pressure. Like everyone was so tired of social pressure that the pendulum swung the other way. They're like, we want no social pressure. We want no socialization. We want everyone to just be specifically who they are. You can be called Zer or Xanax, whatever you want to be called. That could be your pronoun. And there's no, you and I are sitting in this room, right? Like just the simple way how you're sitting, right? That's influencing me. How I'm sitting, that's influencing you. It's like, okay, this is what men do.
Yeah, mirroring.
Right.
Yeah.
The mirror neurons are firing right now. I don't know necessarily that can be replicated through social media.
That's right. That's good. That's good.
So there's a lot of physical things that happen, all of the little micro expressions that communicate something within one another. That's just like, this is how we behave as human beings. I don't think that's not, we're getting like 2% of that when we're engaging online.
Yeah.
So especially when you have the pandemic, you have all these people talking about, oh yeah, I have Tourette's. Oh yeah, I have this, I have that. And people are just like, oh no, it's not that more people are getting it. It's just that, people are just becoming more aware of it. I'm like, I'm a little bit skeptical because it's like, now you're telling me all of these people on TikTok have Tourette's or have DID or have autism. It's like, people are literally just, what's the word? They're kind of just like mimicking what they see online. And online is just a highlight reel. It's not every day. So they think like, and then you get all this attention. What is that doing? You're creating a reward you're creating a sort of reward feedback for all of these different identities. So yeah, there's always going to be another letter for everything, for every identity.
Yeah, I discovered that, and I'm not super versed in this, but I discovered like even the LGBTQ, the Q is queer, and you can be attracted to the opposite sex, be in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex, and still identify as queer. Which then, like, what does that even mean? Like, what that doesn't even mean anything. Like, you're heterosexual, but you're identifying as queer, and I'm just like perplexed by some of this stuff.
It's like being bisexual, pretty much. Like that whole thing where, and it's so crazy because you have these faction wars within that, right? Like it's not as as a lot of people say, when people say black people are not a monolith, it's the same thing with like the LGBT. It's the exact opposite of the monolith. There's so much infighting in there that's why I never feel like, I'm like, LGBT, like that's not even a real thing. There's no unity, bro. Like there's so many lesbians that are, what's called biphobic, where they're just like, no, if you've ever slept with a man before, like you're really just heterosexual, you're just attracted to women, but you're just using us. You're not really bisexual, and or you're just gonna go and marry a man and just use women. And a gold star lesbian where it's like a woman that's never slept with a man before, but if you've ever slept with a man, it's like, no, you can't possibly be lesbian.
I've never heard that term, gold star lesbian. Whoa.
It's a lot. It's like two worlds colliding right now.
Yeah, bro. That's crazy. So in your journey, you said you never identified as a part of the LGBTQ? Is that
I didn't see myself as like part of the LGBT community because at the end of the day, I was attracted to women. And even when I was attracted to trans women, I saw it as, well, I'm attracted to women. Right? Like, and so I never identified with being LGBT. Like I never, I always felt like a loner anyway. So if I'm just like, I'm agender, as in like, that's my experience. I don't feel like a man, nor do I feel like a woman.
And isn't it interesting that like, because of how you felt, your person who you were in a relationship with at the time drops this thought in your brain of like, oh, that means that
maybe you feel like a woman.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't feel like, well, okay, well, maybe you're just non-binary, and now you're using different pronouns and you're living out this identity because an idea was presented to you. That's crazy how we think about it. And then you go at one point you said that you're wearing like feminized clothes, and it just keeps compounding because of how powerful an idea is. Like that's wild to me when you really strip back that, because then I go, what's the opposite of that? What about good ideas? What about beautiful ideas? What about goodness? What about ushering in those values into the world? Like those also can start with just an idea being deposited in somebody.
Right. Yeah. And it's going back to systems, right? Like what's so funny is whenever you see a non-binary person, right? If they were female at birth, right? Assigned female at birth, that's another little vocab word you can get into. That's AFAB, as assigned female at birth. The first thing a lot of non-binary people do is such a meme. They shave their head so that they can look more masculine, so that they can look in between, right? And what I found so interesting, like being someone that was agender, meeting other people that were non-binary, because there's, and I'm trying to keep it short because you could get real complex with it. There's non-binary, the umbrella. Agender falls under that. But there's like trans masculine and trans feminine. You could like, you could be bigender where one day you feel like a woman, the other day you feel like a man. Agender is just, you're genderless. So that's where I felt. And so a lot of the ideologies would be different amongst us where, a lot of them felt like, oh, well, I want to get gender affirming surgery. So if I'm assigned male at birth and I'm a trans woman, I need to affirm my gender by, getting the surgery done, the bottom surgery.
Yeah.
And top surgery, whatever you got to do to look like a woman.
Yeah.
But then the irony is within that space, you also have the same philosophy, which is your genitalia doesn't determine your gender. So
sorry, I'm trying to laugh. That's wow.
This was before the Christianity and everything.
Yeah.
While I'm in this space, I'm having these debates with people. I'm like, okay, you say,
Yeah. So you're deconstructing
yes,
the
yes.
deconstructionist.
I'm like, you say that your genitalia is not your gender, but you need to have your sex line up with your gender, so you're getting surgery. I'm saying none of that matters. It's kind of like being agender was even more radical. There's like, if there's no gender, you shouldn't have to go out and buy girl clothes so that you can look in between. You shouldn't have to shave your head so that you can look in between. You shouldn't have to dye your hair blue or whatever to, you know what I'm saying? But that's what we do as human beings when we communicate something. Appearances do communicate something. People, like, not everything is appearance, obviously. You judge a man by his heart. But from the heart, things manifest outward. You start communicating certain things.
Yeah.
I didn't dress this way and say, how can I look like a man today?
Yeah.
That's just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, I didn't think of that consciously.
Yeah.
But we're communicating something about our values and how we want to be perceived, especially in that hyper awareness of people are viewing me as this. They're viewing, if I'm a woman, I don't want to be seen as a woman. So I need to get rid of anything that looks like a woman. So it's just another performance of gender. Even if you say you're genderless or non-binary and you want to get rid of the whole gender, the binary gender ideology of the status quo, you're still trapped with just creating another gender, which is just, like that girl told me, gender as a performance.
And ultimately additional systems. Like these are all additional
There's
systems.
still more systems.
Yeah.
But even like as an anarchist, and I'm still, for workers' rights and stuff like that.
Sure.
I don't identify with the anarchists of today, but a lot of stuff that anarchists fight for and their values of individuality, when you go deeper into it, it's not that hierarchy is bad. It's unjustified hierarchy.
That's good.
But if it's justifiable, like a parent and a child, you can't tell me that a child and a parent is equal. If a child decides, I want to run out in the road and I have the individual right to do so, and you can't, don't step on my snake or whatever. I don't know. Don't tread on me. Whatever flag it is. A child can't do that. Like, no, a parent is responsible for the child. That's a justified hierarchy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I want to come back to the idea of hierarchies. Tell me more in terms of like because I want to kind of come back to, I want to hear how you transitioned, pun intended, from all of that. But at your most full on state, what did that look like? You mentioned an attraction for trans women. What did that ever materialize into relationships, or was that just kind of more like an online fetish? And then I want to hear how you came out of that. Like, what was the like this was like this far gone, and what would that practically look like?
No, it was relationships. I was in relationships with people that were non-binary, people that were trans women, cis women. So at that point, and at that point, it was so interesting because when I had went to like date people that were non-binary, that's when I realized I'm like, even somebody that was assigned female at birth, I'm like, I'm not attracted to that. Like, I'm not attracted to that performance of gender. Like, so in a sense, it has some sort of merit to say like, gender, because gender is social, but it does come from sex because the way that you perform that gender is still going to come from your sex.
You can't detangle your biological sex from gender.
It's impossible. It's impossible. It's the same way like psychology is always going to be tied to neuroscience. Right, the harder science is always going to be the one that's influencing the social science.
That's good.
So there's no way to say like, your sex just doesn't matter. Like, I've heard a trans woman say, trans women are biological women.
Yeah,
I'm just like, how does that work?
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and so you were in a point in time where you're dressing in clothes to appear more feminine, sometimes to appear more masculine, because it was both, right? And then you are all the way in a relationship with a quote unquote trans woman and or non-binary things. And at that point, does any of it feel abnormal, or does it just nothing matters at that point because of the conclusions of postmodernism and moral relativism?
Yeah. So mind you, I'm polyamorous at this time. So it's multiple relationships I'm having.
Wow.
So so as far as like some of my experiences with that, which was kind of short-lived, like once it got to that point, it wasn't but a lot of time before, you know, my whole testimony with Christ and this and the third. I just started to notice some things, some like subconscious hypocrisies that we all have as human beings. Like, I just started to it felt like, it's so hard to articulate. Like, trans women, if they were straight, right? Like they want somebody that looks like a man. You know what I'm saying? Like they wasn't going for me in the skirt, right? Because now, if we go out into the world holding hands, they just clocked her. Now they know. They know she's trans because they see me, and I don't care about whether people say that's a man in a dress or whatever, or like, oh, that's a non-binary person presenting as non-binary, like that third gender, because, you know, that in-between state, it looks gay, it looks queer, right? It's coded as queer. So when people see someone assigned female at birth with a shaved head, someone assigned male at birth that has a beard but they're wearing a dress, that's clockable. The moment they stand next to a trans woman that wants to live life as a woman, that doesn't want everybody to know like what's in their pants, she gets clocked. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm tracking with you. So it's like you being non-binary just amplifies and magnifies this person that's biologically born a male, but they want to live as a woman in society.
Yes.
It exposes them by being with you.
That was a huge dilemma between, because there's plenty of trans people that are what would be called NB phobic. NB would be non-binary.
Bro, I just want you to know I'm learning so much.
I know.
I did not have this on my bingo
I know.
card.
I feel like a Soviet spy or something. You know, no offense. No offense.
Keep going.
But I'm like a spy that like came from like
yeah.
You know,
you brought
and I'm like,
everything to
yo,
us.
this is what they doing, bro. And I'm
and to be fair to you, this is several years removed, so it's probably evolved even into more.
Oh yeah, this is probably outdated information.
Stuff.
They're gonna see all of this and just be like, this is so primitive. This is not even how we believe anymore. Like, it's primitive, bro. Like NB, we don't use that term anymore. That's derogatory.
Yeah.
But yeah, NB was just short for NB, the letters N and B, but it would be spelled ENBY. So it'd be NB phobic. Could be anyone, including binary trans people, like a trans woman or trans men.
Yeah.
I remember there was this trans woman that was like, I don't respect all of this like non-binary stuff. Y'all are not really transgender. I fought really hard and spent all of this money and you know, it took a lot for me to get to where I am. To be seen as a woman. I don't want to be seen as trans. I want to be seen as a woman. Y'all are fighting for something different. Y'all are fighting for the deconstruction of gender. But we want that because we fought hard to be women.
Jeez.
Why would we fight hard to be women to now deconstruct what it means to be women? So I got all these surgeries for no reason. You telling me like,
wow,
I didn't have to do all of that?
Yeah.
No, there's men and there's women.
Wow.
There's men and there's women. And there's plenty of trans people that, you know, a lot of people have this idea of the LGBT that like, oh, they all think the same.
Yeah.
Not true.
Yeah.
Not true at all. There's so many, you know, gay men, even on YouTube, if you look up, there's a lot of gay men that are completely against that trans. They're like, no, you're either a man or you're a woman or you're in drag or you're a cross-dresser, but there's no such thing as trans. Like you are what you are and you need to embrace what's in it. Because it's two different things. There's sexuality and there's gender. But what did you say about sex and gender is the same thing. Sex cannot be, you know, you can't detangle sexuality from gender. Because sexuality is the expression of the performative gender, which is the manifestation of the sex. And combined with our will and how we choose to play out that God-given sex.
And so you go down to being in these polyamorous relationships. you're dating multiple women, multiple trans women, non-binary identifying people. And then how does Jesus step back into all of this? Because when I hear all this, I'm like, whoa, like just your ability to go deep on all this stuff tells me that you were really in it. And then all of a sudden you just turn a corner and like somehow God just restores you. How did that happen?
You're like, we skipped a few chapters.
Yeah,
That's what everybody keeps commenting, like, man, I skipped a few chapters. I don't know, how did this happen, you know? So when I had left YouTube, I remember being on Sneako's video talking about some of my like spiritual journey and seeing a therapist and just like working on myself.
Which version of Sneako was this? Was this the unhinged red pill Sneako? Before that.
It was like almost to the red pill.
Okay.
This was like 2021.
Okay, it's right before he took that.
Yeah,
off.
like right
Okay,
before
got
that.
you.
Like right before that.
Yeah.
So this was when he was still like doing the street interviews and so
it's golden era Sneako.
Yeah.
There's golden era Sneako.
Yeah, and you know, he was like, oh, like I want to make a video with you, this and the third, or we need to. I'm like, I don't really make videos like that, but you know what? I'll come and speak on your channel because I had stopped making videos for like a whole year already.
And are you out of New York at this point, or are you still in New York?
I was still in New York at that time. We had met in New York,
Mm-hmm.
because he lived in New York as well. So I went on that journey of like meditation daily, got into Buddhism, because I had like that existential OCD, that dissociation, and I was trying to figure out what is all of this. Like, what is it?
And at this point, Jesus is like, that's when I was a kid. I'm not really messing with that.
I wasn't even thinking about.
You weren't even thinking about that.
I wasn't even.
You were
thinking
just
about that.
trying to explore and figure out the truth. Okay.
And so I'm just meditating and trying to spectate my mind and trying to see all of these things, right? And I just started to notice. I started noticing how sensitive my mind was, how sensitive my emotions were, like the things that would trigger it, the things people said, or even just the media you consumed, like listening to music. And I just started to become very keenly aware of that and of my thought process. So during all of this, Jesus steps in later on. And this was like just like it was divine intervention, because like I said, I wasn't thinking about Jesus. Jesus just stepped in. Like I was in meditation one day and I literally heard, go back to the word.
Whoa.
Go back to the word.
Wow. So you're attempting or are practicing Buddhist at this point, and you're in the middle of this polyamorous dating whoever you want to date. And you're meditating, not thinking about your childhood, not thinking about growing up in a church, not thinking about serving, and you hear, go back to the word.
Yeah, that was so far out of my mind.
Wow.
Compared to all of the stuff I was going through at the time. It's like that was so far out of my mind. I wasn't even thinking about that stuff. And it was just like, go back to the word. And just I had this Bible. I don't even remember who it belongs to, but I just had the King James Bible, and I went and I just read, in the beginning was the word, like in John 1 and in Genesis. You know, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And something just clicked, right? Because in that meditation, in meditating period, right, I started to, it's funny, like to use the word deconstruct. That's pretty much what how meditation was for me. Like it was deconstructing and seeing where everything came from, my beliefs and stuff like that, and kind of like separating myself from my beliefs. Like these are the things that I believe and this is what my mind is doing, but there's something behind that, and that's my will that is spectating that. And my mind is just a tool.
Wow.
Whereas usually most people think like their mind is them. Every thought they have, that's their thought.
Yeah.
But that's not really true, because the mind kind of extends beyond yourself. So, you know, like there's all this subconscious stuff that's going on. Like you standing in front of me, like we said, the micro expressions, all the mirror neurons firing off, and the fact that we're on a world stage right now, all of these things are influencing us subconsciously. And there's a will behind that becomes aware of that. The more that you meditate, the more that you're just spectating, the more that you become conscious of there's sounds outside, but there's a me, right? It's not just my brain and it's not just my mind, but there's like a me behind the mind.
You're not just your brain
Yes.
firing off chemicals, consciousness is a fragment of our imagination, or is what is consciousness? What is all this?
Exactly.
Right. No. There's an actual soul.
Right.
There's a person here that's created in the image of God. And that's kind of like, as you deconstructed and reevaluated all these things, that was the kind of the beginning thought.
Right.
And then you're hearing, go back to the word.
Right. Because at my core self, right, I'm like, okay, the mind is just an experience. It's kind of just this field of experience, but none of it is actually me. There's a me. And in that me, there was like this silence, this peace and this silence. And I described in my testimony like how I started to see, like it felt like everything was in constant motion. Like I just started to see things beyond just what the physical, like what they really symbolize. Like I could see things in kind of like liquid form in a sense. And behind that, there was just like a silence. And in that silence, there was peace. So like even seeing my mind in anguish or seeing my mind happy or aroused, whatever, I'm like, there's something behind that can kind of step back just neutrally with no real attachment to that. And I started to realize like, oh, like I really literally can change my mind. Like it's kind of like with neuroplasticity, right? The mind can change the brain, but you can also change your mind. But in that state, the only words I could hear was God. Like it was just silent. But I just started getting words. I have never heard God speak to me like my whole life, like audibly. That was like audible.
And all along, I'm guessing your parents are probably praying for you.
Oh,
And pulling for you.
Oh, yeah.
What do they think through this whole, like, how did they know how far gone you were? In terms of, They did know. So they had to have been praying and fasting and believing that you were going to, wow.
Especially my mom.
Yeah. And so you get this, like, go back to the word, you pull up John 1:1, you pull up Genesis 1. And then what happens is God starts sending you people to share, like you could invite to church, like, because you're like, for all intents and purposes, like you're active in a local church, serving, doing stuff now. Like what was that process like before you're like back in church and back in trying to serve Jesus?
So at that point in time, like I said, I was still doing what I wanted to do because this was just God extending the hand and saying, let me teach you something, right? And so as I began reading, I'm like, Jesus is really like. As I began reading, I'm like, this is true because my mind is like it's a blank slate now. It's like I was no longer attached to any politics. I was no longer like my main priority was trying to figure out what this is, like. Why does God use squares and triangles or ones and twos? Like, why does he use numbers? Like, why? Like, at a fundamental core level, where does this come from, right? You can't say, oh, a universe just came from a universe in perpetuity. Like, something has to defy the laws of physics. Something had to create that.
Yeah. A creator outside of creation.
Right, like who wrote the laws? Who wrote the laws?
Yeah.
You can explain everything by the law of physics. Did the law just create itself? Who's the author?
That's good.
When do you know a piece of paper that just starts writing, bro? Like somebody has to be writing that.
Yeah, that's good.
So who made this?
Yeah. And
so when I read that, spiritually, something in me just knew like this is the truth. This is 100% the truth. This is the word of God. Like God is real and this is true. No matter what I believe, no matter what my opinions are, there's like kind of like that dual consciousness happening, which is kind of like how like you can spiritually know something, but in your flesh is doing something else.
That's good.
There's something that you know, even when it's like your flesh can't help it, right? Because you haven't subdued the flesh yet. And I'm just like, this is true. Now all I have to do is figure out how can I communicate to people that this is true? Like, how do I know? Like, how do I know that this stuff is true? How can I just tell somebody, hey, this is the word of God? That's when I started kind of like my apologetics journey and started like, it's so funny because Inspiring Philosophy, he was like, I didn't know he was a Christian channel. I just saw something that said, the irreducible mind, right? And that was about like consciousness and the mind and the brain and stuff like that. Because I was like, crazy about stuff like that. There was another video I saw that was like, if there are higher dimensions, it's not what you think. That was like a physics video. It was those two videos that I watched when I was high, and I was like, I gotta watch this when I'm sober because this is blowing my mind, and I need to grasp this.
Shout out to Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Jones. That's awesome. So you watched some of his stuff.
He was the first Christian YouTuber that I seen, and I never knew he was Christian until I saw later videos. I'm like, wait, this dude believes in Jesus. I'm like, this dude is real smart.
Yeah, he's real smart.
And he like really has broken down everything about like the mind and all of this stuff. I'm like, so this guy has the same conclusion as me, but he has the evidence. He's studied, he's read all these books. Like, you go to his website, I'm like, bruh,
he got the citations, their sources, all
You go to his website, he got all of these book recommendations. I'm like, I think I lived too long. I should have started this when I was like 12. I don't think I have enough years in my life to read all these books.
So you come in, so you have this in like moment where God starts engaging with you again. He points you back to the word, which, by the way, I mean, that's how it usually works. It's like, it's not, people want a personal word without going to the word, right? And so it's like the fact that you're getting a personal word, but that word is telling you to go to the word. To the word as well. It's confirmation, in my opinion. And then you go down the path. So are you primarily looking at apologetics videos, and that's kind of starting to reshape your faith?
Yeah, I started to look at the historical, because I had an experiential, testimonial experience with Jesus. I know he's real. Everybody else has to know the truth. I'm like, bruh, how am I going to be able to communicate this to people? And it's like, I was so far gone. I was so far away from God. How am I going to, like, I just started to feel so bad for all like the times that Christians have tried to talk to me about Jesus. And instead of them influencing me, I influenced them. There's people that were in the faith that were super Christian that now they just out doing craziness. And they're either not Christian, or they might as well just say that they're Christian with their lips. And I'm just like, it feels like I'm responsible for that. I literally came on the internet, you know, blaspheming Christianity, making a video talking about, oh yeah, hell is lit, this, then the third, like saying it's a joke. And I'm responsible for people like watching that. You know what I'm saying? And how now I have to go on a journey to fix my mind first. Because I can't just run back and tell people, oh yeah, this Jesus is real in 2021. Hence me being gone. I'm like, okay, I gotta get right.
Yeah. So 2021. This is post pandemic. Were you in New York during the pandemic?
Yes, up until the about May or something like that. That's when I moved to Atlanta. That's when I moved to Atlanta.
Of 2021?
May, yeah.
And so you have this moment, and is it fair to say oddly spurred and started from the conversation with Sneeko? Is that video still up?
No, it's not, because remember, his channel got deleted.
Oh, that's
right. I think somebody might have re-uploaded, like maybe clips of it or something like that.
Yeah.
But
what was it about the Sneeko conversation that kind of set you down this path?
Well, that was just a conversation that happened during the Buddhism thing. But it wasn't like a it wasn't like something that sparked anything, but that's kind of like record.
Got you.
To show like in that gap of me being gone, you can kind of see like, and I was like wearing feminine clothes, and I was talking about all of this different stuff about like free will. We were talking about different philosophical stuff. Yeah. And you could see how like we were wrestling with some of these ideas. But yeah, that wasn't like something that sparked anything, but it was something that is a kind of bookmark to see like where I was at that time.
Gotcha. You start having this communication with God. You go into the Word. You've deconstructed everything there is to deconstruct. There's nothing else to deconstruct. So you come full circle and you end up right back at Jesus, which is where you started. But now you have a more apologetic framework. You understand the historicity of the scriptures and why Jesus is who he says he is and why there's validity to the claims. And it's not just personal anymore. And so how long, and this is around 2021, how long until you fully come back to being plugged into a local church? Because in the process, you get married, you have a kid. Like, what was all that, and how long did all of that take for you to fully come back to Jesus?
I'll give you a good little marriage story of how we got married, because it all plugs into that. Okay. So, 2021, we were staying with my mother-in-law for a bit around November, December, in that transition to go to for that new job that my wife had in Florida. And I remember when I went there, the trip there, her mom picked us up, and on the way she's like playing gospel and stuff like that, and I'm just like, I started asking her a question. I'm like, hey, so like, did you grow up in religion? Like, how did you come to this? Because it's so funny that you're, you know, playing this stuff. And I had no idea that this was my wife's, well, not at the time, she wasn't my wife yet. I didn't know that this was like her history, that she had a mom that was like into that. And so I started asking her whole story about how she also grew up in the church. And I saw like how much we both strayed away from the church. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is God right here.
So you're discovering that she your girlfriend or your wife at this point?
At that time, she was my girlfriend.
So you're discovering this girl that you're with is also brought up in the church.
Yes.
And her mom is clearly a Christian. And you're having this encounter with God. Right. And so it's all kind of like the pieces of the puzzle coming together.
Starting to fit.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, so when's the last time you've been to church? She said, I haven't been going to church in a long time, you know, this and the third.
This is your girlfriend or your girlfriend's mom?
My girlfriend's mom.
Okay.
And so we get, when we got to the house, I remember it hit like Saturday. I was like, what's your church? We should go to church. And she was like, oh yeah, we can all go. Sure. And then we went. That was the first time I went to church in years, in many, many years. And we went there, and it felt good to be there. It was a little bit strange because it was a mega church. It was a mega church. So it was like, I'm coming from this old school Pentecostal background. Where there was no stage lights, there was no fog machine, there was no giant iPads and stuff. So I'm like, wow, church is different. It's different.
Oh, it changed.
I'm like, yo, this is, and what's funny to me was I left there feeling like this is not the church that I left. Like I left to go to the world, and now I'm leaving the world to come to church, but the church is kind of looking a little bit too similar to the world.
Interesting.
And I guess it's like I didn't want to be legalistic about it, right? Like just because, they had this and that. But you could just tell, like, it just felt commercial. It felt like there was no fellowship. There was no, it didn't feel like you were being invited into the family of God. It felt like you were just there to check off on your list. Like, okay, went to church on Sunday. I did what I have to do as a Christian. And now we all go home and we empty out the parking lot for the next service to come in. And the next service, you know, and just, it felt very businessy. And especially like walking in and like getting welcome cards and all of this stuff. I was like, yo, this is some high production value stuff. I've never seen this in the church. It feels like I'm in a concert right now. So that was that experience. But nonetheless, I still went because I was like, I'm not in search of the perfect church or like, I know my relationship with God. And if I want to be, I should be the change that I want to see if there's an issue. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, if you're at a church, as long as they believe in the fundamentals, of course, don't try to nitpick because, there might be a little more liberal, a little bit more conservative, or because they might have a different fashion sense or whatever. So I'm just like, I'm going to just go because at the end of the day, I'm not here for people. I'm here for God and I'm here to worship.
That's good.
And for the word.
That's good.
And it was a good word. It was biblical. You know what I'm saying? Despite me being a little off put by some of the modern stuff because it wasn't what I was used to. The nostalgia of, I was expecting, I'm going to go back to church and it's going to be how it was. Like Pentecostals falling out and speaking in tongues. It was very, very different. It was non-denominational. So that was that first time. Then when we moved to Fort Walton, my priority was we have to find a church. I want to make it a regular practice to go to church, find other people that believe in Christ and develop myself and sharpening iron and just get to know people that also believe that. I was very isolated. I didn't really have no friends and nothing like where I lived. So it was Easter and I had went to this church in Fort Walton.
And this is where you reside now?
No.
This is not where you reside now?
That's where I was. Part of the testimony goes over like kind of some of the stuff that happened down there. But yeah, I was living there for a bit, and I remember it was just like a really small church, and I had just looked up churches near me or whatever. I'm like, all right, that one I could actually walk to. I didn't have a car, so I just walked 30 minutes down. And it was maybe like 10 people in there, tops. And the word that he gave, I was like, this is the gospel. Like he was preaching like, you know, it wasn't watered down, but it also wasn't the legalistic, you're going to hell for wearing a skirt, you know, that's above your knees. It was about the gospel. It was about Jesus. He was preaching Jesus on Easter. So I kept going to that church. And I remember I told them, you know, some of my skills, like, oh yeah, I played the saxophone, this and the third. And they were super excited about that. They wanted to have me on the worship team. So like maybe like 4 or 5 months later, he was like, you know, I'm confident in, you know the faith. You've been here, the stuff that you say at Bible studies, like, you know your stuff, like you're in your word. But he was like, so what's going on with Daciana? Like, what's between you two? Like, are you guys living together? I was like, oh yeah, we are. He's like, okay, so like, are you guys married? Or I was like, oh no, we're not married. And of course, start all the excuses like, oh, well, you know, she's basically my wife. We have joint accounts and everything.
We're married in our hearts.
Right. Basically, like, and it's so funny because I was watching that George Janko podcast, and I was like, yo, it's so crazy because like that's so normal because the society we live in is so desolate that just like we can, like, if we're halfway righteous,
at least we're monogamous,
right? You know what I'm saying? At least we're monogamous, right? And I think a lot of heterosexual Christians are like that, where it's just like, at least I'm not gay. At least I'm not, you know, out here, you know. But there's so much, you know, there's so much righteousness is high. It's a high calling. So, he was like, okay, I understand what you mean, and I can tell that y'all are, you know, y'all act as a family unit. He's like, that's not how other people are gonna see it. And the way I first took it was like, oh, so he cares about appearances. Like he cares about like how people see. But yeah, appearances do matter. He's like, if people ask, are y'all married? And you say, no, you're not technically married, but you are in your heart or whatever, like you just said, then they're going to think that that's okay. That's not okay. And you're an example. He was like, even if you're not a leader, right? You're not like an elder, but you're up there. And so people are going to look up to you. So people see you as an example, even if you don't see yourself as an example. He was like, what's stopping you? I was like, oh, well, you know, we're like really broke right now. Similar to the podcast I was just talking about. So I felt so, it resonated so much when I saw that George Janko podcast, because I was like, that's all the same things that like we all tell ourselves, like, oh, we don't have enough money. Oh, this, oh, that. And then I thought about it for maybe like a month. Because he was like, oh, you guys can like just get a marriage certificate, this and the third. You guys can't just do that, and we'll do a ceremony for you guys right here. We'll marry you in the church. He was basically telling me like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh, but I'm not gonna have my mom there for the wedding and this and that. And I was just like thinking about it, and I'm just like, yo, like, I'm really full of it, because at the end of the day, like, the ceremony and all that, that's just like a little obstacle that I'm putting in place of a commitment that I already made. Like, you know what I'm saying? You've already consummated something that you didn't even have rights to. So I remember my wife one day at work, we're sitting down, and she said, she was saying how like, oh yeah, you could get married like at the courthouse, like, you know, you just get a marriage certificate, this and the third. And we was like joking back and forth. I was like, oh, so we could go right now and do that? She was like, yeah, if we wanted to. I was like, so like, how long would that take? Like, if we literally went down to the court and like got the certificate, this and the third. She said, I don't know. She looked it up. I was like, oh, it's like $75 or something like that. I was like, okay, so let's do it. She was like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, why not? I mean, we have joint bank accounts. We're acting like we're married. Why not have that? And if we want to do a ceremony later, we can always do it. The ceremony ain't going nowhere. You know what I'm saying?
That's good.
But we're already in the trenches together. We're already struggling together. We broke together. So why say, oh yeah, we're gonna get married when we have the money? We don't have money, and we doing married people things. And it's a disrespect to a woman. Marriage is something that dignifies a woman, right? If I wanted to just leave her flat, she has zero rights.
That's right.
And I have zero rights if she wanted to leave me flat. You know, and I remember we had a car that was in her name. And I started to just look at all these different things. I'm like, we're acting like we're together, but really we're separate. Like there's nothing.
There's nothing binding you together.
There's nothing binding, right? And people see that remember where I come from, the whole polyamorous, relationship anarchy, that marriage is like a trap, right? Like marriage is, it creates, what is the term for it? What's called a prescriptive hierarchy. So there's prescriptive hierarchy and descriptive hierarchy, right? Like if you and a woman are in a relationship and you say, this is my girlfriend, that's a descriptive hierarchy. It means like, yeah, this is just describing it. But a prescriptive hierarchy would be saying, me and this is my girlfriend and she's the only girlfriend that I can have. Now you're shutting out all of the opportunities for any other relationships that you can have, which would be violating the ethics of relationship anarchy or, polyamory, where it's supposed to be like, oh, I'm my own individual person and I should be able to add somebody to my life in whatever capacity, and this relationship should not influence that relationship, which is impossible. It's wishful thinking, but it's impossible. It don't matter if you have what's called kitchen table polyamory, where everyone like is in communication and there's all this communication and we're like, okay, we all agree to this and we're all in communication. Something is going to influence something else.
You know what's interesting, just a quick side note, is how both the polyamory and the red pill community have a disdain for marriage. They feel like marriage traps you, and they both advocate for, or at least on the red pill side, for one man to have multiple women. So it's like that weird horseshoe theory that like, wait a minute, these two ideologies that are very opposing in a lot of ways come to very similar conclusions. Marriage bad because a man can be forced to sign a bad contract and he doesn't have no power and she can take him for all he's worth. That's the red pill side. And it's like, and a man should have options and have multiple women. And it's like, it's weird that both of those worldviews come to those conclusions,
It's funny how incompatible that is with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Like with the red pill, like, okay, so you're trapped and she can take you for all your money. You don't think we've stolen from Jesus? You don't think all of the terrible things we've done to Jesus and he's still married to us?
Yeah,
as Christians.
Faithful, faithful when we aren't.
Let alone the unbeliever that while we were still sinners, he died for us so that we can be reconciled with the Father.
Amen.
And yet there's some Christians that really believe in red pill and like, I'm not going to get married. And they have like this fear of commitment, right? But you're not supposed to do righteousness because of what others are doing. It's kind of like how that mindset that I had was like, oh, well, everybody else is cheating, so I'm gonna cheat too. No, you got to stay righteous regardless. If my wife goes and cheats on me and then I go and cheat, I need to get my lick back. I've been wanting to do that. That's what I wanted to do. And people say, no, I just wanted to. No, you wanted to do that. That's what you want to do. Because if you really believed in the marriage, if you really believe in righteousness, you would do it unconditionally. Jesus is righteous unconditionally. He ain't gonna, switch up and no, he's not a lick back God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, that's good. So at what point do you tell your parents that you're back in church? And what was their response?
I feel like my mom didn't know for a hot minute, to be honest. Like, when was it? I was already going to this church for a good minute. And I guess I would just like sprinkle in there like, oh yeah, I'm going to church for this and the third. Or we would start talking about like prayer or like my dad. And I guess like she just started seeing us talking about that stuff more and more.
She had to have been overjoyed.
Very. And she had asked me, she was like, what about, are you still like having gender confusion and stuff like that? I was like, no. Yeah. And she was like, wow, thank God all of my answers are being all of my prayers are being answered. And when she heard that I had got married, she like, there's some people that would be like, you didn't invite me to the wedding or you're not going to do that. Yeah. No, she was like, wow, my prayers have been answered. Wow. I'm like, man, why everything you praying for? It's like,
hey,
I'm like, let me live my life. Yeah. You praying a little bit too much.
Yeah. That's them prayers from them praying mothers, bro. Yeah. Those got a different anointing on them sometimes. Yeah. So your mom finds out you're now married. The beautiful part about your journey is this is several years ago at this point, right?
Yeah, that was 2022.
2022.
When we got married was 2022. Yes.
Yeah. And the beautiful part is you don't run to YouTube and announce all of this and become this Christian YouTuber. Like you go back to living a normal life. I mean, you don't go back. You continue living a normal life. You continue leading a quiet life. You're working. You're in a church, and you're just being faithful to your family. Which was there ever that idea of like, ooh, I want to be more bold? Because that's a lot of times public figures when they come to faith, like they want to tell the whole world, and sometimes they're still figuring out their faith.
Right,
like it's still a very messy process to figure out what they believe and what kind of church they want to go to.
I witnessed it.
Yeah,
like I said, like I was on YouTube, like I became a lurker, right? Like I went from being the person being lurked on to being the lurker. Like I was watching you, I was watching What Do You Meme, I was watching David Woods, you know, all these different, and I just used to see like new people coming to the faith, and I was very much into filling myself with the word,
Amen.
Right, and making sure that I understand it, and so I knew that I had to share, you know, what I knew with people. But my first instinct wasn't to just go online in front of millions, because to me, it felt like a teaching position. Regardless of people want to come on YouTube and say, guys, I'm not a teacher, guys, I'm not a pastor. It's like, people look to you as like you're teaching.
Still degree of authority you have.
It's like, I felt like I did not have the authority to do that. You know, like, and so in that, in the midst of that, like I was, you know, I would go to work at Walmart. I was working overnight, and we would have all of these deep conversations and stuff, like me and this coworker of mine and other people, and we would be talking about God. I would be bringing up Jesus all the time. And like he believed in, like, you know, Egyptian Book of the Dead and like stuff like that. A lot of like the alternative history stuff. And so we would be talking. He'd be like, "Oh, how do you know that Jesus was really this or that?" And I'm just like hitting him with the facts, and he's hitting me with stuff. And he'd be like, "I'm gonna recommend this book to you." I'd be like, "All right, I'm gonna recommend the Book of Galatians to you. How about that?" And so I'll read a little bit of that. You read a little bit of this. How about that? Deal or no deal? And so you know, I had some of that stuff going on, and also it's like, remember, I had left YouTube kind of like with a resentment toward it, feeling like I wasn't who I used to be. Like I used to get online and say how I felt and what I thought without a care for what people said. Somewhere along the lines, the algorithm got a hold of me, I think. And I just, you know, I started to become more paranoid. I guess as the consequences of the internet started to rise, because remember, it went from being this fringe little hobby that people did to now like millions of people are on the internet. So I was just like, something happened. Why am I so fearful? And why is it that I've changed to care so much what other people think? And that's how I got on that Buddhist meditation journey. And like, why all of these things like have such an easy effect on me. Like when I had first came to faith, like I had told you earlier, like I didn't listen to music. Like I stopped listening to anything that had to do with like drugs. Like I used to love Don Toliver and Designer, all of these different, and God bless them. I hope that they develop a relationship with God, and I hope that they, you know, come into using their talents for God and righteousness. And these were talented individuals, but I loved their music, the vibe, but now it meant something different. I can't listen to you talking about, you know, Zanny bars, suicide doors, like drinking Henny and, you know, till you tripping. I can't. That I had a whole new awareness because of the combination of the Buddhist meditation and now seeing what that is, like the awareness that the meditation gave me, plus the revealing of the righteousness of Jesus, saying that all of that stuff leads to death and destruction. So being off of YouTube for that long, and then seeing people come into faith, I didn't even have interest in being online. Like I was like, I wish I didn't do this. I wish.
Well, because you spent so much time chronically online.
Yes.
That now that you're living a normal, quiet life.
That's what I wanted. I was like, I just want to do some laundry, bro. I just want to go to the grocery store. And I was in Fort Walton Beach, like this little town in Florida that nobody really knew about. And I was just happy for nobody to know me. I got exhausted of that.
Yeah.
Like I just wanted to live a normal life.
Yeah.
And I promise you, bro, I was not gonna come back. I was never gonna make a video again. Like I was happy. I was happy with that, working my little Walmart job and just building my life all over again as a regular person. I was completely fine with serving and being a humble servant at you know, that didn't matter to me. When that moment that I decided to come back was 2023 in July. And I actually have,
because you spent a lot of time working on that video. That was a long video, the testimony video.
Yes,
you did,
yes.
Yeah, which we'll link below.
Yeah,
from this,
I shot some of it in I think August or September, and then later on added some more. Like it was, man, I would like to read you a journal entry of mine to describe, if that's okay. I gotta go get it real quick. It's in my book bag.
Yeah, grab it. So when is this entry?
This was October 8th, 2023. No, this is November 8th. But I actually this was describing something that had already happened in July.
Okay.
And I had just remembered it, and I'm like, I need to write this down at some point, and I was just procrastinating. But I finally wrote it down in November.
Fire.
So so this is the entry. I said, I sit in bed with tiresome eyes and beaten feet. Working 2 minimum wage jobs feels like chasing a cheetah for meat. I am lowly, hungry, and unnoticed by my superiors, unknown to my peers. Then a vision. So this is when I was like, just working 2 regular jobs. Nobody knew who I was. Like, nobody knows, like, oh yeah, that's Almonte, the guy from YouTube. Nobody knows that, right? And I was just like so tired that day. And so this is when, I believe this was probably like the first vision I ever had, like while not asleep. My head sits tall on my neck. Sunflowers overgrow from the sockets of my eyes. From my mouth overflows chamomile and pink mums from my ears. A garden surrounds me. So that was the vision that I had, and it was like literally just my face. And that face was just like dead. Right? So I was just dead and just purple. And all of these different like plants started growing from out of these sockets. And I remember when that happened, I said, God, what does this mean? Like, and he said, you know. And all he said was, I said, man, I know. And that was like it was like a disappointment. Like when God calls you to do something, you're like, you asking me to do something that I really was not trying to do. Because in that, he was showing me that something was dead, right? Like I was dead, but I wasn't meant to just stay dead, right? There's something that's supposed to blossom out of that. Out of all of those holes, something, a garden. And when I'm like, I got to tell my testimony. Even if it's the last thing I do, I got to tell my testimony. And mind you, before this, there was other videos that I've thought of doing before, and I'm just like, I'm not putting that up. I'm not putting that up. This one was just like, I have to do it. I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to do it. It's been 3 years. No one's heard nothing from me. I'm going to just have to do it. So I literally just recorded. The first take was 5 hours, and I wasn't even halfway in yet.
Jeez.
I wasn't even halfway through the story.
Yeah.
So I was like, Then I recorded it again. So imagine you sitting here just talking for 5 hours and you're like, nah, scrap that. I'm like, this is too long. It's too much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try to, I have to be a better storyteller and get this information out. So something reasonable at least. Second time, it's about 3.5 hours or 4, something like that. That when I start chopping up, I get it down to about 3.5 hours. I go to my wife. I'm like, this is what has to happen.
Yeah.
You know that this is not something that I wanted to do. Like I was completely done with this. And I'm still completely done. Yet God is calling me to do this. And I don't want no part of that. I just want a regular, normal life. But God is like, he's calling me to do this. And I remember it's so funny because that day, my friend had texted me like an old meme that was like circulating for like the 15th time that year of me. He was like, bro, you can't even make yourself irrelevant even if you wanted to.
So there's still memes going on around.
Yes.
you.
And when he said that,
What was the meme?
the I don't give a F.
Oh, okay. Okay. I gotta dig that one up.
And so I'm like, it's crazy. Like, he don't even realize that he was giving me a word without even realizing. I'm just like, I want to be a normal person. And then looking at my entire life, God did not intend for me to just be a part, right? Like to kind of just blend in. He always set me apart for, you know, for just a higher standard. And if I got to suffer for it, I don't mind suffering for God. I do not mind. If I suffered while I was in sin, I suffered for unrighteousness in the world. So why not suffer for righteousness? And yeah, me and my wife had a long conversation about that. And it was just, it was worrying for both of us because I had to be real with her. I'm like, listen, you know the whole story. You know that I have death threats. This is why I'm not even comfortable going to New York. This and the third. I went to New York for the first time like a couple months ago, in years. But I was like exiled. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like people was talking about, oh, we gonna stomp you out, kill you if we see you. She's like, just random people. So I'm like, you know, like what could entail, right? Like the last threat, one of the biggest threats I received was like, if you don't get on here and, you know, admit to something that you didn't do, then we gonna find you and stab you this and the third. And I'm like, you know, if I get on there saying anything other than what they want me to say, that can embolden some people to want to do something now. And it can start that whole cycle back up again of people finding my address and wanting to come after me this and the third.
And this was connected to before you transitioned from YouTube and then as you're transitioning to the faith, all of a sudden, all these baseless allegations started coming about stuff you were doing in your past life. And it almost, from an ex-girlfriend, that it almost became this like pile-on type situation.
It became a whole like campaign that was curated. Like they had posters and everything.
Yeah, that's
like,
crazy.
And when that happened, as I said in my testimony, I was just like, you know, the temptation to defend yourself is so real. Shout out to Corey Minor, because he's always talking about, he's like, if people talk about you, let them talk. But the temptation to defend, I had all of these friends telling me, oh, defend yourself. You need to do this. You need to release these documents or that. I said, I'm going to let the truth speak for itself. I'm going to be obedient to God, because he said, listen, because you did not believe the truth about me, the world will believe a lie about you.
And so there was initially a young lady who you had dated who said some stuff about you, and then there was other people that came in and started saying, yeah, he did this to me, he did that to me, but those are people you had never even met. Like they were like just really
some of them were people that I know who it was, or I did meet them, and then there was others that like I never met them, or like I don't even know who they are, like because they were, you know, accounts that were like they were all anonymous. Like some stories I'm just like, what am I? And the whole mental process that you go through is like, am I misremembering something? Is this? And like you literally start to like get gaslighted yourself, because you're like, what? This didn't happen. Then you're like, wait, did it? Is there something that I'm missing? Like, and I just sat there, I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna just stay in my relationship with God. I'm gonna just let them show all of their hands. Let them do whatever y'all want to do. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah. I think the need to defend yourself can oftentimes be one out of trying to have a sense of vengeance and control, when what you're dealing with sounds like you are sexually promiscuous, you're in these open relationships, and in that lifestyle, people are going to get hurt. Like people are going to like have expectations, and things don't pan out, a relationship ends, and especially like post Me Too movement, it's like I believe all women always. And it's like, well, all women always? Like all the time? Wait a second. Because now you're talking about somebody's reputation. You're a husband, you're a father now, and these things are coming out. And it's happened, like Russell Brand went through it. You know what I mean? Like other people have like had the same path, and as they're trying to turn things around, all of a sudden these things come up. And there's not never, but seldom is there like actual charges being filed or evidence being presented or anything of the sort. And so you're smearing someone's name that's attempting to turn it around and go a different direction.
Yeah, and full account, not just like open relationships. Like I was actively cheating in monogamous and polyamorous relationships. So, you know, these were people that like, that's why in the video, I'm like, this is not to make myself look like a good person. I literally describe myself as a horrible person. And this is why I need Christ more than anybody else. You know, when people say like, oh, so you needed religion. Yeah, I need Christ. I'm a double down on that. I can't be a good person on my own. That's why I'm like, listen, emotional abuse, I did it. Cheating, hurting, lying, manipulating, all of that to hide that promiscuity, to hide that void, which is what cheaters do. It's like, it's a void that they can never fill. But never raped, never been a pedophile. Like that stuff, no. You know what I'm saying?
And those are serious allegations.
Right, and I'm just like, I can take full accountability for what I did, but I can't take accountability for something that I didn't do. But like I said, you can't go in the street and slap somebody and they turn around and shoot you and you say, oh no, you went too far. Why'd you go in the street and slap somebody? This is a cold world. You can't decide your consequences, right? Like if you did wrong, it's like when people say, oh, so God is going to let someone burn in hell forever? Yes, because he's a holy God and he will not tolerate sin. So you can't turn around and do wrong. And then when a consequence isn't always proportionate to your standards, right? And that's a consequence. And I warn a lot of my male friends about this all the time. You can't just be going out here sleeping with strangers, sleeping with girls, or you cheating, or you doing this and the third. You don't think people are going to want revenge? You don't think people want their lick back? What they going to do? Cheat on you back? No, they got to get you worse. They got to sleep with your brother, or they got to accuse you of rape.
Gosh, man. So do you think that some of these were misunderstandings, or do you think these were folks that were hurt and perhaps recollected things that just weren't accurate at all? In terms of the one girl that came out, and then there was like comments underneath it. I think it was a Twitter post.
Well, as far as the one girl that had made like the whole smear campaign, for a fact, and I could show you some of the stuff off record, but for a fact, like there's just certain things that were said that is just like, that's a flat out lie, and there's no way that it could be a misunderstanding or like a misremembering. It's like, no, there's documentation of that, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. You could go and find it, and you lied. Like you're going out of the way to lie and taking flaws of mine to make hyperbole or to like, and that's what it is, right? Like that's how the enemy works. He will stretch, he will take the truth and twist it, right, until it's a whole nother beast. And so, but as
choose the sin, can't choose the consequence.
You can't. You can't. And people don't realize that when the Bible says if you sow destruction, you reap destruction, it's real destruction. It's real destruction. A lot of people think like they're just gonna get a slap on the wrist or just like, it's real destruction. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
it's heavy, man. It's heavy because I don't think anybody understands the gravity of going through and having stuff said about you. You know what I mean? And then being like, like I didn't treat these women the way I should have because I was far gone. But like I didn't do that. Like that's a whole nother thing that we talk about. And it's so common and it's so prevalent. But to your point, like people really got to be out here with what they're doing because I mean, just the appearance of something like that you could be in a room with somebody alone and they could say this and this happened. And you're like, no, it didn't happen.
And that's what it's compiling, right? Like nowadays, I'm not going to get into that theory too deep, but I think a lot of people care a little bit too much about democracy in a sense that they like pure democracy. Like the greater the number of people that believe something, the more it's true. That's what moral relativism has done. So if 50 people say, I don't care if 50 people tell me that you walked in a room and shot somebody. If 50 people tell me that you walked in a room and shot somebody, show me the body. Just because 50 people told me that you did that, that doesn't mean you still have the burden of proof. But nowadays it's, there's all these, but listen, all it takes is one person to accuse you of something, right? that one girl that you hurt, that accused you of that, you move on to the next, and you're fornicating, you cheat on the next girlfriend too.
Yeah.
Now she already knows a weak point. Oh, the other girl said that he raped her, this and the third. If I come out and say that too, now it's even more believable because I can't.
Yeah.
Anybody that's what I said. Like, if somebody makes a call to action that says, oh, anybody can anonymously say whatever about you, anybody, literally anybody could be trolling, or anybody that doesn't like you already could come and say something about you. Or just to be a part of something, just to pile on you, for whatever reason that people do it. But it's not as uncommon as people would like to think. Like, I felt so alone, but go on Reddit, look up false accusations. People that are not celebrity status, people that are not like influencer status, go through these things.
Yeah. So was that some of the apprehension that you're talking to your wife and you're like, you know the whole story, in terms of you saying anything publicly and sharing your testimony, because you knew that these people were already coming for you? There was already death threats.
Yes.
With this, your exes, other partners, and that is why you were like apprehensive to go and share your testimony and make that video.
Yes. I had to tell her straight up. I'm like, it kind of feels like when Jesus was telling the disciples, hey, I'm gonna die. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and like, could you imagine? He's like, hey, I'm gonna die, and they're like sad about it, and instead of him going to comfort them, he's like, yeah, this is how it's gonna happen. And he just like kind of doubles down on it. That's what it feels like. It's like, all right, I need to be real with you. You know what I'm saying? I can't give you a false sense of optimism. I need to tell you what's the worst possible case scenario. I had severe death threats. It was to my address, all of this stuff. I have a baby now. If you don't want, I said, if you don't want no part of this, because when we met, right, I wasn't on YouTube anymore. So she knew me as the person that was formerly a YouTuber, but she didn't, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, this is different. It kind of is like, it's like this is a whole nother journey. And so I'm just like, listen, I understand if this marriage is not going to work for you, because I know the gravity of this. Like, I could die. I could die, and I've accepted that. But that's my burden. If you still want to be married and you still want to do this, knowing like what could happen now, and that now I'm going to be in the public spotlight, and that things might get worse.
Yeah.
I don't even blame you. I don't see you as like, oh, you're not loyal. I'm just like, I know the gravity of the situation. And to me, remember, before we even got married, I felt like I wasn't even deserving of being married. I felt like, who would want to be with me? Somebody that has gone through all of this stuff and now has all of this baggage, you know? And it always perplexed me as to why my wife was like, no, I just want to be with you. I don't care what happens. I just want to be with you.
It's a good woman right there.
Yeah.
So you make the video, you share your testimony, you don't shy away from the allegations, you lean into them, you share your side of it. You don't go into too deep. You don't throw anybody under the bus, and all of that's there. What was the reaction to the video, and what did you think about it? Because I read some of the comments, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of people riding for you and defending you.
There's a lot of positivity, and you know, of course, we all have a negativity bias when it comes to looking at our own comment section.
Sure.
We look at the, oh my God, great word, bro, and we just scroll right past that and be like, look at that, all the haters.
Yeah.
So I had to reel in all that anxiety, you know, and not slip into that old mentality of being scared of what people think. I'm like, at the end of the day, if God is for me, who could come against me?
Amen.
Right. And a lot of the stuff with people saying, oh, you didn't even address it, or it was people that literally admittedly didn't watch the video. They didn't watch the whole video. They didn't even watch 5 minutes because
I thought you timestamped it, or people were definitely timestamping.
Yeah, they were, like, people saying he does. It's like, but you wanted him to address it in this way, and he didn't address it the way you wanted him to address it.
Right.
But that's the thing. The focus of that video was to talk about what God was doing in my life. It wasn't to defend myself. And if people want to see me as somebody that was such a terrible person, then that's their prerogative. I'm like, that's why I said at the end of the video, I'm like, if you see me as an amazing person, that's a testimony to God that's working through me. It's not me. If you see me as an awful person, that's a testimony to what God can do to an awful person and change his whole life around. So either or, it doesn't matter what your perspective of me is. This is just to get you to, this is just to inspire thought, which is what I've always been about. I've never cared if people agreed or disagreed. I'm like, as long as I got you to think about what I'm talking about, even if you stayed on the same opinion, but you had to think about it, right? Like it's a seed that I'm planting. So as long as I got to plant that seed, you're gonna remember this.
Yeah. And so, is there any hope to share more of your story, to upload more on YouTube? I know you kind of said, like, for you, it's always just been kind of like a passion project, a fun outlet hobby.
Right.
But do you plan to ever share more of your testimony of what God's done?
Yeah, I definitely do. There's just so much, there's just so much more. I've thought of writing a book. I'm too busy though. But you know, the story as it's being told, there's just so much that I could share, and I want to share more. And not just religious stuff, just stuff that's, you know, God has his hand on it, obviously, but it's not like it's not as obvious that it's, you know, it's not religious content.
Yeah.
So there's still stuff I want to get on and just talk about.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think you've always had like just an interesting voice, and your ability to articulate yourself has always been, you've always just seemed more articulate beyond your years. You know what I mean? Like from watching you from when you were a teenager to now, like coming full circle and seeing everything in the way that video performed and how much of a pleasant surprise it was to me. I was like, man, this is fire. And I'm glad that you shared it, because I think it's a cautionary tale for people, right? Because it's like, yo, you can deconstruct all the isms you want, but like there's gonna be real life ramifications that you're gonna have to deal with. And some of that stuff is like there with you forever, you know? And it doesn't mean that you're beyond hope and beyond redemption and beyond God's goodness. You are clearly a testament of that, right? And I couldn't imagine the journey your parents had to have been on, watching you and seeing you and how much they were praising God, watching you come back to the faith and the man that you are now. But I think it's also a story of hope and like God's goodness and God's faithfulness when you weren't faithful. Like God kept pursuing you.
That's ultimately what it is.
You're
like,
sitting here meditating and God just shows up and is like,
if you are faithless, he abides faithful. He cannot deny himself. It's just who he is.
Yeah.
He's just so good.
There's probably some folks watching that maybe are still in the lifestyle that you were engaging in. Perhaps there's some folks watching who are fans of the content you made. They stumbled across, they saw your testimony, the algorithm worked this conversation up to them. What would be like a final word and a final thought that you would have for current fans of yours and or people who may still be living the lifestyle that that you're like, yo, this ain't it, fam. Trust me, this ain't it. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, not it. What word would you have for them?
When people have tried to talk to me about God and I was doing all of that, I was just like, okay, I believe in God, but I don't care about what you're talking about right now. So a lot of people shy away from God because they've made something else their identity. So they don't really leave any room for something new that might contradict what they're doing. The great thing about Jesus is that where sin abounds, grace abounds.
Come on. Yeah.
So just because you don't look holy or your life doesn't look holy, it doesn't mean that God doesn't fit in there. Because God is calling everyone. And when he called me, what did I do so special that he called me? I was in that while I was in sin, he called out to me and he taught me. And all of the changes that I have now is not because a man came to me and said, do this differently. It's a natural sanctification process that came from just accepting God's love, just accepting his grace, accepting who Jesus is. And the more you accept who he is, the more you become like him. But I think a lot of people get really defensive because whatever sin it is, whatever sin, whether it's they want to keep getting drunk or they want to keep getting high or they want to keep sexing, they want to keep doing whatever, they're like, nah, that's not for me. That church stuff is not for me. It is for you. I promise you it is for you. Like, I'm the person that needed it the most. It's for you. And nobody is ever too far gone from deserving love, from deserving respect. That's a free gift that God has given to each and every single one of us as image bearers. There may be some things in your life that when you first accept God, it may take some time to let go of. But that's the process. That's us being human and learning how to surrender, learning how to let go of things. But you can't take the gift of God without letting go of things. Because your hands need to be free for that. You have to surrender something. So all you have to do is say, I surrender my life. I don't know what my life is going to look like from here to 3 months or 4 months. I don't know if I'm ready to quit smoking or quit getting drunk or quit sexing. I'm still gay. I'm still this. I don't know, God. I don't know. But you know. So you take my life into your hands and you do whatever you want with it. That's how I changed. Because even after that experience, it wasn't until a year later that I said, God, I feel like I have no identity. Like I've shed everything, but who do you want me to be? I told him, I said, if this is not the woman I'm supposed to marry, take it away. If my punishment for what I've done in the past is that I'm never going to be married and I'm just going to have to be a celibate monk for the rest of my life, so be it. I was willing to give up everything. And a lot of times, for a lot of hard-headed people, a lot of stiff-necked people like myself, you just have to reach the depths. You have to go all the way and sink and sink and sink and sink and sink into darkness. But that rope is just hanging there. That rope is always there.
It's good.
It's always there. God never left. He's right there just waiting for you. The more you try to dig yourself out of a hole, which is an oxymoron because you can't dig yourself out of a hole, you just going deeper. Just look up.
Yeah.
That's all you got. Just look up. Try something different. Eventually what you're doing, it's not going to work no more. You're unhappy, depressed, you're anxious. You have all of these different problems going on, but you think that your way is working? Because I could promise you, being honest, you're probably not happy. If you was living the type of life I was living, you're probably not happy. If you assess everything, you're probably not happy.
Yeah. It's good, man. That's it. That's beautiful. Jeffrey, Nova, Alamonte, thank you for coming, brother. Appreciate you. We got to do this again sometime. We're at past the 2 hour mark, and
nice.
and I have more questions, so we're gonna do part 2 someday.
All right.
So maybe I'll come to you next time. Appreciate you doing this, brother. This was fire, and I'll have his channel tagged and his testimony pinned. You guys go watch the full thing. It's riveting. This conversation was riveting. So thank you, brother. Appreciate you. All right, guys, we're out of here. Peace. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.